The hollow estate. The morning fog clung to the jagged coastline of Big Sur like a whisper of ghosts. Behind the iron gates and perfectly manicured hedges, Cliffside Manor stood as a monument to both architectural brilliance and profound emptiness. Lucas Bennett had designed the glass and cedar masterpiece himself, back when his name still appeared on magazine covers and his innovative smart home technology made him a Silicon Valley legend. Now, at 38, he moved through the expansive rooms like a shadow, his footsteps echoing against marble floors that no longer recognized laughter. 3 years had passed since the accident that took his brother and sister-in-law, leaving him the reluctant guardian of a fortune and a legacy he no longer cared to maintain. Lucas stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his study, coffee cooling in his hand as he stared out at the endless Pacific. The house staff referred to him in hushed tones, brilliant, handsome, impossibly distant. His last housekeeper had quit after 6 months, citing his suffocating silence as reason enough to seek employment elsewhere. "Mr. Bennett?" A voice, gentle but assured, broke through his thoughts. He turned slowly, irritation flickering across his face at the interruption. The woman standing in the doorway was unfamiliar, petite with auburn hair pulled back in a simple knot, wearing practical clothes and a tentative smile. "I'm Olivia Parker, your new housekeeper." She stepped forward, extending her hand. "Miss Rivera showed me around before she left." Lucas merely nodded, ignoring her outstretched hand until she awkwardly lowered it. "Your office is off limits." "So is the East Wing," he said flatly. "Meals can be left in the kitchen. I don't require conversation." If his coldness affected her, she didn't show it. "Understood, Mr. Bennett. I've reviewed the contract and your requirements. I should mention I have a degree in environmental science, so I'm comfortable maintaining the greenhouse as well." This caught Lucas off guard. The greenhouse had been his sister-in-law's passion project, a stunning glass sanctuary filled with rare orchids and tropical plants. Since her death, he'd hired specialists to maintain it, unable to bear witnessing its beauty himself. "That won't be necessary," he replied sharply. Olivia nodded, but something in her eyes, a quiet determination, made him uneasy. She wasn't intimidated by him, which was unusual and strangely irritating. "Is there anything else you need this morning?" she asked. "Privacy," he said, turning back to the window. He heard her soft footsteps retreating, followed by the gentle click of the door. Later that afternoon, Lucas emerged from his study to find the house transformed. Sunlight streamed through windows that had long been shrouded by heavy curtains. The scent of lemon polish and fresh flowers replaced the sterile emptiness. In the kitchen, a pot of soup simmered on the stove, something homemade and aromatic that stirred unwelcome memories of family dinners. He found Olivia in the library, carefully dusting his collection of first editions. "I didn't authorize these changes," he said, his voice tight. She turned, meeting his gaze directly. "The contract states I'm to maintain the home to the highest standard. These books were developing mildew from the humidity and lack of air circulation." For the first time in years, Lucas found himself momentarily speechless. Everyone in his orbit had learned to anticipate his moods, to retreat from his sharp edges. This woman, Olivia, seemed unaffected by his wealth, his reputation, or his carefully constructed walls. As dusk settled over Cliffside Manor that evening, Lucas sat alone in his study, working on code that would someday power another innovation he couldn't bring himself to care about. From somewhere in the house, he heard soft music, something classical and haunting. Despite himself, he closed his eyes and listened. The hollow estate had a new pulse, however faint. And for the first time in 3 years, Lucas Bennett felt something stir within his carefully numbed heart. An irritation, yes, but also the faintest flicker of curiosity. Retry UB Part 2 to 3 Part 2. Whispers of spring 3 weeks passed at Cliffside Manor with an unexpected rhythm. Lucas maintained his distance, but found himself increasingly aware of Olivia's presence. She moved through the house with quiet efficiency, respecting his boundaries while subtly transforming his sterile environment. Fresh flowers appeared in rooms he frequented. The kitchen now smelled of fresh bread and herbs rather than emptiness. One misty morning, Lucas woke earlier than usual. Sleep had become his enemy lately. Dreams of his brother's laugh and his sister-in-law's kind eyes haunted him more frequently since Olivia's arrival. He made his way to the kitchen for coffee, stopping abruptly when he saw the back door ajar. Through the window, he spotted Olivia in the garden, kneeling in the soil despite the early hour. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, catching the first rays of sunlight. Curious despite himself, Lucas stepped outside. "You're up early," he said, startling her. Olivia looked up, brushing dirt from her hands. The coastal sage was struggling. "They need morning light to thrive." Lucas glanced at the native plants she was tending, recognizing his sister-in-law's careful planning in their arrangement. "You know about California native landscaping?" "My thesis was on drought-resistant ecosystems," she replied, standing. "These gardens are remarkable, designed to support local wildlife while conserving water." Something in her genuine appreciation made Lucas's chest tighten. "Eliza designed them." "My sister-in-law." It was the first time he'd spoken her name aloud in months. Olivia seemed to understand the significance, offering only a gentle nod. She had extraordinary vision. The way these gardens transition from cultivated to wild space is seamless. Lucas found himself walking alongside. Olivia, as she pointed out features of the garden he'd forgotten or never noticed, how certain plants attracted native butterflies, how others supported the bee population. Her knowledge was extensive, her passion evident in the way her eyes brightened when describing the interconnected ecosystem. "You didn't mention your environmental background when you applied," Lucas said as they reached the greenhouse. Olivia shrugged. "The agency said you wanted a housekeeper, not a botanist. I needed the job." Her honesty was refreshing. My father's medical bills didn't leave much choice. For the first time, Lucas saw beyond her role in his home. "What happened to your father?" "Parkinson's. 4 years of treatment before he passed last year." Her voice held steady, but Lucas recognized the carefully controlled grief. "I was 2 semesters away from my master's." They stood in silence, morning fog swirling around them. Then, surprising himself, Lucas reached for the greenhouse door. "Would you like to see inside?" he asked quietly. The wonder on Olivia's face as she stepped into the lush, humid space made something long dormant stir in Lucas. She moved reverently past exotic plants, identifying rare specimens with genuine delight. "This is incredible," she breathed, stopping before a flowering orchid with delicate purple blooms. "Dendrobium aphyllum. They're nearly impossible to cultivate this far north." "Eliza spent years creating the right microclimate," Lucas said, the words painful but necessary. "No one's really tended to them properly since—" Olivia turned to him, her expression serious. "They're surviving, but they miss being loved." Her words hung in the warm air between them, carrying a weight beyond the plants surrounding them. That evening, Lucas found himself working in the living room instead of his secluded office. He told himself it was for the change of scenery, not because Olivia hummed softly while arranging books nearby. When she brought him tea without being asked, he surprised them both by saying, "Thank you." Later that week, a delivery arrived, specialized plant nutrients and rare seeds. Lucas had ordered them after researching what the greenhouse collection needed. When Olivia discovered them on the kitchen counter, she looked up at him with questioning eyes. "For the greenhouse," he said simply. "You mentioned the orchids needed special care." Her smile, genuine and warm, caught him off guard. "Would you like to help me apply them? Some of these specimens require 4 hands." Lucas had meetings, deadlines, a company that still demanded his reluctant attention. "I can't," he said automatically, then found himself adding, "but perhaps tomorrow morning." That night, Lucas dreamed not of loss, but of green things growing in gentle hands. When he woke, the hollow ache in his chest felt different, not gone, but somehow altered, as if the first whisper of spring had found its way into winter's depths. The storm. Within. The coastal forecast had warned of the approaching storm for days, but its ferocity still caught everyone by surprise. By mid-afternoon, rain lashed against the windows of Cliffside Manor with violent determination, and winds bent the cypress trees nearly horizontal along the cliffside. Lucas paced his office, distracted from work by occasional glances toward the greenhouse visible from his window. The glass structure stood vulnerable against the darkening sky. He'd reinforced it after the last major storm, but anxiety still crawled up his spine. Too many precious things had been lost already. His phone rang, the property's security system alerting him to potential structural concerns. Before he could respond, the power flickered and died, plunging the house into gray semi-darkness. Lucas grabbed a flashlight and headed downstairs, calling for Olivia. When no answer came, unease quickened his steps. He checked the kitchen, the living areas, all empty. A terrible thought struck him, and he rushed toward the back door, fighting against wind that nearly knocked him sideways as he stepped outside. Through sheets of rain, he spotted her, a small figure struggling with the greenhouse door, trying to secure it against the storm. Without hesitation, Lucas ran to her, rain soaking him instantly. "Olivia!" he shouted above the wind. "Get inside!" She turned, her face pale with worry. The ventilation system failed when the power went. "The heat will build up and kill everything inside." Understanding flashed through him. She wasn't just concerned about glass and metal, but the living collection that had meant everything to Eliza. Together they forced the door open, stumbling into the humid interior. The automated roof vents had closed when the power failed, trapping the growing heat. Olivia quickly showed Lucas how to manually crank them open enough to allow airflow without letting in the punishing rain. They worked side by side, securing pots, moving delicate specimens away from areas where the rain now leaked through seams in the glass. When a panel above them creaked ominously, Lucas instinctively pulled Olivia against him, shielding her as a shower of water and small debris rained down. For a moment they stood frozen, his arms around her, her hands pressed against his chest. Lucas became acutely aware of her breathing, the scent of jasmine in her hair, the warmth of another human being close to him after years of careful distance. Olivia looked up at him, rainwater clinging to her eyelashes. "Thank you," she whispered. Something broke loose inside him, a dam cracking under too much pressure. Before he could think, Lucas brushed a strand of wet hair from her face, his fingers lingering against her cheek. The greenhouse groaned around them, bringing reality crashing back. "We should get to the house," he said, his voice rough. They secured what they could and raced back to the mansion, drenched and breathless. In the kitchen, Lucas built a fire in the rarely used hearth, while Olivia found towels and blankets. The domesticity of the moment struck him as they sat before the flames, storm raging outside. "I'm sorry about the greenhouse," Olivia said softly. "I know how important it is to you." Lucas stared into the fire. "Not to me," he admitted. "To Eliza, and to my brother James because it mattered to her." The names no longer felt like blades in his throat. "What happened to them?" Olivia asked, her voice gentle but direct. No one had dared ask him directly in years. The question should have angered him, yet instead Lucas felt something like relief. "Plane crash. A private flight to their anniversary celebration in Napa." His voice sounded distant to his own ears. "I was supposed to be with them. Last-minute meeting kept me in San Francisco." Olivia didn't offer platitudes or empty sympathy. Instead, she asked, "What were they like?" The question opened something in Lucas he thought permanently sealed. Words came slowly at first, then in a rush. Stories about James's terrible jokes and brilliant mind, Eliza's passion for conservation, and her ability to see beauty everywhere. For hours as the storm raged, Lucas spoke of the people he'd loved and lost, while Olivia listened with quiet attention. "The greenhouse was Eliza's heart," he finally said, exhaustion and emotion making his voice rough. "I couldn't bear to see it, but couldn't bear to let it die either." "That's why you hired specialists to maintain it," Olivia realized. Lucas nodded, meeting her eyes. "But none of them loved it. Not like she did. Not like you seemed to," he didn't say. In the flickering firelight, with rain drumming against the windows, something shifted between them. The storm that had threatened destruction had instead forced Lucas to confront the tempest within him, grief and guilt he'd kept frozen for years. As the fire burned low, Olivia gently touched his hand. Thank you for trusting me with their memory. That night, for the first time in 3 years, Lucas slept deeply, without dreams of what he'd lost, but rather of what might impossibly still grow. Fragile Bloom's morning arrived with gentle clarity after the storm's fury. Sunlight streamed through windows still speckled with raindrops, casting prism patterns across the floors of Cliffside Manor. Lucas woke with a strange sensation in his chest, a lightness he barely recognized. He found Olivia in the greenhouse, already assessing the damage. Sunlight filtered through the glass ceiling, illuminating her as she carefully tended to fallen plants. When she looked up and saw him, her smile held a new warmth that made his heart stutter. "It's not as bad as I feared," she said, gesturing to the space around them. "Most of the collection survived." Lucas moved closer, noticing how she had already begun repairs, righting fallen pots, carefully pruning damaged stems. "I've called a restoration team for the structural damage," he said, surprising himself with how easily the decision had come. Olivia nodded, turning her attention to a rare orchid with damaged petals. "This one was Eliza's favorite, wasn't it?" she asked softly. The question caught him off guard. "How did you know?" "It's positioned at the center of everything, where the light hits perfectly at morning and afternoon. It's the spot you'd give to something treasured." Her insight was uncanny, her perception of details he'd never shared striking a chord within him. They worked together throughout the morning, salvaging what they could. Lucas found himself sharing stories. How Eliza had discovered the rare black orchid during a research trip to Thailand, how she'd spent 3 years cultivating it before it finally bloomed. Memories that had once felt like shards of glass in his throat now flowed more easily, still painful but somehow healing in their release. Over the following weeks, something delicate bloomed between them. Lucas began joining Olivia for coffee in the mornings, their conversations extending beyond the greenhouse and gardens. He learned about her childhood in Oregon, her passion for environmental restoration, the dreams she'd put on hold to care for her father. She discovered his dry sense of humor, his brilliant mind for innovation, his secret fondness for classic jazz. One evening, as they sat on the terrace watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of gold and crimson, Lucas found himself studying her profile, the gentle curve of her cheek, the strands of hair that caught the fading light. When she turned and caught him looking, neither turned away. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly. Lucas hesitated, unused to voicing emotions he'd kept silent for so long. "That I didn't expect this," he finally said. "Any of this." Olivia's hand found his on the stone balustrade, her touch sending warmth through his veins. "Neither did I." The first kiss came naturally, as inevitable as tide meeting shore. Her lips were soft against his, tentative at first, then with growing certainty. Lucas pulled her closer, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his chest, a rhythm that seemed to whisper of possibility, of life beyond grief. Later that night, as moonlight spilled across his bedroom, Lucas traced the contours of Olivia's face with gentle fingers, memorizing each detail. Her skin was warm beneath his touch, her eyes reflecting starlight through the open window. "I'm afraid," he confessed in the darkness. Olivia covered his hand with her own. "Of what?" "Of feeling this much again. Of losing it." The words were barely audible, torn from somewhere deep inside him. She moved closer, her body fitting perfectly against his. "Love isn't a finite resource, Lucas. Loving me doesn't diminish what you felt for them. And fear." She pressed her lips to his palm. "Fear can't protect you from loss." Their bodies found each other with tender discovery, hands mapping unexplored territory, lips trailing promises along skin. Lucas relearned the language of intimacy, the sacred communion of two people finding sanctuary in each other's arms. In the quiet aftermath, wrapped in tangled sheets and shared breaths, he felt not the betrayal of old grief, but the miracle of new beginnings. Yet dawn brought shadows. As sunshine filtered through the curtains, Lucas watched Olivia sleep and felt panic rise within him. Happiness felt dangerous, precarious, a cliff edge from which he might fall at any moment. By the time she woke, he had retreated behind walls of professional courtesy. "I have meetings in the city," he said, already dressed in business attire. "I'll be gone for a few days." Confusion and hurt flickered across her face. "Lucas, about last night, it was a mistake," he interrupted, the words sharp and dishonest. "We should maintain appropriate boundaries." A garden of second chances. The Seattle rain fell in gentle curtains, nothing like the dramatic coastal storms of Big Sur. Olivia pulled her jacket tighter as she hurried from the university greenhouse to the environmental sciences building. 2 months had passed since she'd left Cliffside Manor. The teaching assistant position had been a stroke of luck, allowing her to resume her master's program while covering basic expenses. Her tiny apartment near campus was nothing like the grand spaces of Lucas's home, but it was hers, filled with plants and natural light. If she sometimes woke reaching for someone who wasn't there, she blamed it on dreams she couldn't control. "Professor Winters wants to see you," her colleague mentioned as she entered the lab. Something about a potential research grant. Curious, Olivia made her way to the department head's office. Inside, she found Professor Winters beaming beside a scale model of what appeared to be a massive greenhouse complex. "Ah, Olivia, perfect timing. I wanted you to see this proposal before our department meeting." The professor gestured excitedly toward the model. "A major tech company is funding a sustainable agriculture research center right here in Washington. Self-sufficient, carbon negative, with living quarters for researchers and students." Olivia studied the intricate design, the ingenious water recycling system, the solar array integrated into curved glass panels, the careful arrangement of growing spaces that maximize natural light. "It's remarkable," she admitted, something about the design stirring a sense of recognition. "Who's behind it?" "Bennett Innovations," Professor Winters replied. "The founder himself presented the proposal yesterday. He specifically requested you as lead researcher for the native species restoration component." Olivia's heart thundered in her chest. "Lucas Bennett was here?" "Still is, actually. Using the conference room to finalize some details." Professor Winters gave her a curious look. "Do you know him?" Before she could answer, the office door opened. Lucas stood in the doorway, his familiar presence sending a jolt through her. He looked different. The sharp edges softened, the shadows beneath his eyes less pronounced. When his gaze found hers, the world around them seemed to still. "Could we have a moment?" he asked quietly. Professor Winters excused herself, leaving them alone with the miniature vision of something not yet built. "It's good to see you." "Olivia," Lucas said, his voice carrying the weight of unspoken words. She crossed her arms, protection against the emotions threatening to overwhelm her. "You could have called." "I needed to show you, not tell you." He gestured to the model. "This is what I've been working on since you left." Olivia moved closer, examining the details with new understanding. "You designed this?" "Every inch." His eyes never left her face. "It incorporates everything you taught me about sustainable ecosystems, native restoration, creating spaces where things can heal and grow." The significance wasn't lost on her. "And you came all this way to offer me a job?" "No." Lucas stepped closer, close enough that she could catch the familiar scent of him. "I came to ask for forgiveness, and to see if you might consider a different kind of partnership." From his pocket, he withdrew a small glass vial containing a delicate seedling. Olivia recognized it immediately, the heart's ease she had left him, now sprouting with new life. "It grew," she whispered. "So did I." Lucas set the vial carefully on the desk. "You were right about grief and love, about fear not protecting us from loss. I was so afraid of feeling again that I pushed away the very person who helped me remember how." Olivia felt tears threatening. "Lucas, please let me finish," he said gently. "After you left, I finally visited my brother's grave. Told him about you, about the greenhouse, about learning to live again." His voice grew thick with emotion. "Then I started designing this place, not just as a research facility, but as a legacy for Eliza's environmental work and a future I hope we might share." He reached for her hands, his touch sending warmth through her veins. "The facility will be built regardless of your answer. The endowment for student researchers is already established. But I'm hoping you'll consider coming home, not as my employee, but as my partner in every sense. Home? Olivia echoed, her heart racing. I sold Cliffside Manor, Lucas admitted. Too many ghosts, too many mistakes. But I kept the greenhouse and surrounding gardens. He gestured to a section of the model she hadn't noticed. A modest house nestled among trees, with a glass structure beside it catching the light. I've been building something new. Something ours, if you want it. Olivia studied his face, seeing hope and vulnerability where once there had been only carefully constructed walls. You hurt me, she said honestly. I know. I was a coward. His thumbs traced gentle circles on her palms. But loving you has made me brave. Outside the windows, Seattle's rain had given way to unexpected sunshine, light breaking through clouds in golden shafts. Olivia thought of the heart's ease seedling, how it had pushed through soil toward light, how some things must be broken before they could grow. I never stopped loving you, she confessed softly. The smile that transformed Lucas's face was like sunrise after the longest night. When he pulled her into his arms, Olivia felt the steady beat of his heart against hers, two rhythms finding harmony, perfectly in sync. In the greenhouse they eventually built together, where science and beauty merged in sustainable harmony. The black orchid from Cliffside Manor found a place of honor. Beside it grew a garden of heart's ease, their purple blooms a testament to healing that had once seemed impossible. On quiet evenings, Lucas would often find Olivia there, tending to their growing collection with gentle hands. Sometimes she would look up and catch him watching her with wonder, as if still amazed by the second chance they had created together. What are you thinking? She would ask, echoing a question from their beginning, and Lucas, no longer afraid of the answer, would smile and say that some gardens only bloom when they've weathered the storm. Their love story, like the carefully tended ecosystem surrounding them, continued to flourish, proof that even hearts long dormant can awaken to extraordinary life when given the proper care, patience, and the courage to grow toward the light.